I was working all day. I had no idea.
Yeah, I'm working hard and don't see any of that.
Are we planning on having other
of the day already yet?
Who's got a submarine? Sounds like a submarine.
Yeah, we've got a little feedback on the line.
Sorry, that was me. I was getting on YouTube live, and then
Kim?
I heard you guys all while I was live and recording. So, but we're good to go.
Thank you.
Well, for any of you just joining us on YouTube or on social media or on this Zoom, we are going to get started with our AB 617 steering committee meeting in just a few moments. We're going to give everybody a chance to log in, and we're so excited to see you today. Happy Tuesday.
Thank you. By the way, how long is this meeting last?
2 hours, not 2.5. So this one should go until 7.
Okay. I think I can make it to my other meeting.
You got it. Got another one after this, Douglas?
Actually, it's on now, so I'm gonna have to either leave this early or go to this one after this. You know what I mean? So that's what. So I haven't decided what I'm gonna do.
Can't leave us, Douglas.
Well, I know I can't because you guys are paying Mark, so I cannot do that. That's only the hold I have.
Don't let me hold you, Douglas.
I know I have other interpreter waiting for me till I know.
Hashtag Terp struggle.
Yeah. Oh, Mark, he replaced you.
Yeah.
Before she goes, I'm letting Eleanor say hi to everyone.
Oh my gosh, look how big she's getting.
I know, she's enormous. I was looking at the average weight of a 1-year-old, and that's how much she weighs. And she will be 5 months tomorrow. So.
That's impressive.
Oh my gosh.
5 months.
Wow, hi sweetheart. Love it. Love, love, love.
So sweet, just like mama.
Say something, Jess. I want to see you bigger.
How much did you say she was, Jessica?
She will be 5 months tomorrow, and she weighs 19 pounds.
Woo!
I know. I have strong biceps now.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say carrying her around. Hope she walks soon.
I know, that's what I was saying. I was like, hopefully that's like, furthers her development a little bit in the walking and crawling situation.
You've got a dog, right, Jess? Yeah. So when she starts crawling and walking and chasing the dog, she'll just like
it's down. Like built-in play system. Yes.
Oh yeah. Well, it is 5 o'clock, and it looks like we're still getting some people logging on. So for those of you that are just joining us, thank you. We do have on the screen some instructions for how to change your screen name. You should be pretty familiar with this. Over the last few months, we've kind of structured our screen name recommendations the same. So please do change your screen name, and if you need any help with that, feel free to unmute yourself or raise a hand, a blue hand, and someone from our team will help you do that. We're going to get started in just a couple of moments. We just want to make sure that we have enough people on the line so that we can begin our conversation with the full team. Looks like we're getting very close. And for those of you that are members of the steering committee, you do know that ILG sometimes goes in and changes your screen names after you've changed it. If you do see some adjustments to your screen name that you didn't make, that's just because our team is making sure that we can track all of the voting members of the CSD. So there is no issue if that happens. Just know that it's us making some adjustments to your name for our logistical purposes. Did I say that? Did you just do something to Matt? Yeah, I didn't see it, but I figured it was happening. We always get questions from people that wonder, how did my name change? We have some host controls behind the scenes to make some
I
name
like to
changes.
take credit. I go very fast and furious.
Kim and Hannah behind the scenes might do that as our host and co-host. All right, we've got a pretty good group on the line, so I'm going to go ahead and move us forward and begin the meeting. Good evening, everyone. My name is Erica Manuel. I'm the CEO of the Institute for Local Government, and I lead the facilitation team for the Stockton Steering Committee for the AB 617 community in Stockton. As you might have just heard, my colleagues Kim and Hannah are on the line. They are working behind the scenes to help make sure that this virtual Zoom meeting kind of gets underway and managed very well, and that we make sure that logistically you're all taken care of. We also want to make sure that this process of going through and talking to you all about air quality in Stockton in a virtual environment, that runs smoothly, that all the voices are heard and incorporated, and that you successfully move forward with the goal, which is reducing emissions in Stockton with your SERP and then the implementation of that document. So we have had a lot of Zoom meetings, and I'm not going to go through any specifics. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out via chat to Kim, Hannah, or Erica. The biggest things to remember about the Zoom logistics are to make sure that your screen name is accurate. We can rename you if necessary, and we will happily do that if you just let us know you need a little help. If you are in the stipend program, this is a stipend eligible meeting, and so you would need to stay in this meeting for 75% of the meeting to get credit for it. And then this meeting is being recorded, as you may see. We are live on YouTube and occasionally on Facebook as well, and there will be public comments at the end. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there might be votes taken at this meeting, so we may be changing some of your screen names over the course of the first few moments of this meeting so that we can keep track of all the voting members. So these CSC meetings are always open to the public, and we are grateful to the public members that participate through social media and occasionally on the line. So any members of the public that are on this Zoom line, we will ask you to participate in the public comment portion of the meeting at the very end. And as always, if you're on social media, your comments and questions can be posted on YouTube, on Facebook, or submitted to the email address ab617@valleyair.org during the meeting. And then we will then address those questions and comments during the public comment period at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this meeting over to our host at the Air District for a welcome, and then I will go back over the agenda and talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today in this special meeting of the 617 community.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Erica. So thankful to have everybody join us again. Just really appreciate everybody's continuing commitment, participation, and completely understand the desire to make sure that we fully discuss these different things with the Community Steering Committee to make sure that everybody has the information that they need to feel comfortable to move forward with the SERP and the various strategies that are included in it. And yeah, so at this point, I'll turn it back over to Erica.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ryan, and thanks to the Air District team. Again, this is a special meeting. We decided at last week's meeting where you all discussed the SERP that you wanted a little bit more time to discuss some of the potential options today. And so this is likely going to be the last meeting before your SERP is sent to the Air District Board for review. So as we said last week, it's a huge milestone for this committee in your SERP development process. It's a fantastic effort you've all given and that you continue to give. And that today, we're going to talk about 3 specific measures related to the port. So I'd like to have, just to make sure that we're clear on what the agenda is for today, I'm going to ask if Hannah or Kim can post the screenshot for our agenda slide, and we will talk a little bit about what we're covering today. So we're going to discuss 3 measures related to the port, and then we're going to review the modified SERP language that was discussed at the last meeting. So one quick thing to remember, for those of you, if there are any on the line that were not a part of the conversation last week, what we did last week was we had a very robust conversation. The intention was to review the SERP language and to determine which additional measures went in the SERP. And this committee voted on bringing the locomotive measure and a school bus measure and including those in the SERP and then modifying the SERP language a bit. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to discuss the port measures, which were some straggling measures we talked about a little bit last week, but didn't complete the conversation. And then we're going to review some of the additional SERP language, modified language that was agreed upon with the vote last week that would be adjusted in the SERP before it goes to the Air District Board. So we've got a little time on the agenda today to discuss that language. And then we're going to wrap up and we're going to talk about next steps because if everything moves forward, we are looking at a slightly different phase of this committee and the work that's being done. So we're going to talk through that. So today is, it's a short agenda in the sense that there aren't a lot of items for discussion, but it's a really important agenda item because there are still some significant discussions that we could have about the port, and we certainly want to make sure you all have enough time to deliberate. As I mentioned earlier in the meeting, this meeting is actually slated to take 2 hours, not 2.5 like the last few meetings. So do please plan accordingly for that. Can I ask you to change the next slide, please? So on your screens here is a snapshot of where we are in the SERP development. So we're concurrently working on 2 boxes today, the measure selection and then the SERP consensus. And the context for that is, you know, we have already moved the SERP forward. It's a great document as it stands, but we definitely want the opportunity to discuss these additional measures and see if we'd like to add port conversations and measures into the SERP as well. So that's kind of why 2 boxes are covered. The Air District will be submitting the SERP this week as part of the agenda packet for the next board meeting for the Air District Board. So that's why you are at, you know, your orange box that you're seeing on the screen right now is very close to taking place. And then, as you may have noted on the agenda, a vote might be taken today if we can't reach consensus through discussion. So that's why your screen names may be changing, and just be prepared for those of you if you are worried about whether or not you can stay on the line, just know that we may be voting on a number of items. And then just before we move on, I did want to acknowledge this, just, you know, you look at this development process and the timelines, and I just want to acknowledge the hundreds of hours of work, incredible commitment that each of you have shown to get to this place today. I think when you think about every meeting that you're attending and every email you're responding to and every document that you read, it just really represents your time and your commitment to this effort. And you should just all be really, really proud. All right, so next slide. This slide just outlines a few of the tips for sharing the virtual space. As a reminder, step up and step back. You know, that is an opportunity for you to allow others' opinions to be represented. And then if you haven't presented your thoughts, feel free to step up and speak up because your opinions are really important as well. And I especially flag residents, some of you that have been very quiet through this process, I'd love to see you voice your thoughts. As you may recall, we also made a couple changes to our chat function. I want to thank everyone for being flexible with that. We received some feedback that it was really difficult to follow the chat and the verbal discussion at the same time. So especially when there were disparate conversations and separate things happening. So now, and for the last few meetings, we've been asking everyone to limit the chat discussion to the specific item that's being discussed right then, so that we can kind of focus the conversation and get a better sense of what the committee thinks. And then we also, of course, really want to hear from residents. We want to know about the impacts of the SERP on people living in the boundary, representing the community. So residents, please think of your participation in this discussion as a chance for all of us to learn, to grow, and to share. And then last but not least, if you can, and especially when you're speaking, if you could keep your cameras on, that would be really helpful. And we ask that because it allows us to read your body language and see your expressions and get a sense of the feeling that you might have in your nonverbal cues. So, you know, if we were in person, it wouldn't be an issue, but with the virtual meeting, it's really important that we understand what's happening in the conversation, and that certainly I see and that others can see how you might be feeling or thinking about a certain issue. And we definitely want to make sure we don't misinterpret anything and that we get everything right. So I do want to thank you in advance for those adjustments to make sure that we share this virtual space as well as possible and as effectively as possible. All right, so now let's move forward to our agenda for today. As I mentioned, last week, we talked about school buses, we talked about locomotives, and you voted to move those measures into the SERP. You unanimously approved that SERP with a few language modifications. It's going to go to the Air District Board. It's going to be on that agenda packet that's going to the Air District Board this week, which is, I think, 7 days in advance of the meeting. and you asked the Air District to add some language that speaks to the coordination collaboration. We're going to talk about that at the second half of this agenda today. As I mentioned, your SERP's really good. It's fantastic. You guys had really strong positive feelings about it last week. And there's really just a couple things related to the port that we need to talk about to see whether or not you want to have that option to include those items in the SERP. So that's what we're doing today. There were some preliminary conversations about the port measures at the last meeting. We spent a good 45 minutes talking about the port and adjusting and thinking about some of the context for that dialogue. We did not complete that dialogue, and that's why we're continuing that today. And there's also been a lot of materials and information that has been shared, not just in the last week, certainly in the last 2 weeks, and we want to make sure everybody's up to speed on all of those things. So that's where we are for today. The first part of our conversation is going to be about the port and really thinking about everything that's been shared, some conversations that have been had, and some additional dialogue. I want to ask Ryan to kind of set the stage for you all, because he's got a lot of information about what some of the committee members have talked about and what the goals certainly are going to be for today. And I think it'd be good for him to set the stage for you all and give you an overview of what's transpired since last week so that everyone's on the same page, and then we'll begin our discussion. So with that, I will turn it over to Ryan.
Yeah, thanks again, Erica. So I have a presentation. Last time I wasn't as successful, so let's see if I can get it right this time. All right, can everybody see the slides? The slide.
Yes, we see you.
And the date is, yeah, okay. So just want to kind of cover, to kick it off, and kind of how we got to the suggestion of port incentive measures in the community emission reduction program that was presented to the committee. So I know there was tremendous effort to provide historical data and information to the steering committee about the breakup and the makeup for where pollution was coming from within the community. And through that process, we also took a lot of feedback from the community steering committee members in developing what their major sources of concern of air pollution and toxic air pollution in the Stockton community. And so from that, these were basically it. And so one of them was the Port of Stockton operations. And so understanding that the steps that the district took were, we listened to the steering committee, what were the things that we could look at the port. So we reached out to the port, we found out what types of equipment that they had, and looked at what the regulatory measures was already covered. And so then we came up with a proposal for controls of ocean-going vessels, the commercial harbor equipment, which is used by businesses and partners at the port, and then also tugboats, which are owned by third-party companies. At no point was the district reached out to and asked to include incentive measures. Like I said, this was really based on just understanding where the sources of pollution were and what opportunities there were to reduce both criteria and toxic air pollutions, which then reduce exposure to those harmful pollutants. I think that was one of the general misunderstandings, and I think it's important to bring up here and to talk with the committee about that really was just driven from that primary reason. Another thing that seems that there's a little bit of confusion on what incentives themselves are and what the purpose of incentives are. I think when people hear about giving money to businesses, that it's almost like a blank check that there's no requirements or onuses that are put on the people that actually take those opportunities to do this type of work. And so there's a very robust process for people that have to go through in order to receive grants. So obviously there's just the administrative stuff. When there's opportunities to apply for grants, they have to submit applications to us. As an organization, we have to evaluate the application and make sure if there are guidelines available, that those things are meeting those guidelines. We have to often inspect old equipment to make sure that it's eligible for those programs. And if it's not, then it wouldn't be eligible. We have to calculate what the potential of the grant amount is. In the majority of the cases, the companies only get a percentage of what the total of the cost is. The intent of the incentives isn't just to completely fund the projects. Most of the time, it's these opportunities where the companies are making decisions on, do I do this now or do I wait 2, 3, 5, 10 years? And so what the incentives are intended to do is to increase the likelihood that they're going to make that transition sooner. And that's where we've been as an organization. The Air District has been very successful at getting funds, and very thankful for partners like CARB in helping us and get a good share of the state money that's available to the Valley, because that's where the money is really needed. We have so many disadvantaged communities throughout the whole district. Having these opportunities to get rid of these old, dirtier pieces of equipment and replace them with zero or near zero equipment, those are the things that are going to help us get to attain federal and state standards and improve local air quality, which is so important to all of us that are here tonight. So once we've kind of gone through that process in the district, we actually have to execute a contract with the participant with very specific requirements, including performance criteria, the project life, and they have to continue to report to us. And then at that point, the participant will purchase the equipment and put the new equipment into service. And then we go out and we inspect the new equipment to make sure that the equipment that they propose to buy is the equipment that they bought, and to make sure that the old equipment has been destroyed so it can no longer be used anywhere in the Valley. The district at that point reimburses the participant whatever the agreed amount is to them. And then like I said, then the participants would provide the district reports. So I just wanted to point out that this is a very robust process, that it's not just giving money to these organizations. It's to increase the likelihood that these transitions happen faster than they would otherwise, or may not happen. In some cases, if there's not regulatory requirements, there may not be the replacement of equipment at all. And so that's why, while it isn't what we rely solely on, it is an important piece to the puzzle that as an organization that we're working towards in our goal to have clean air for everybody in the Valley. Couple other things, just talking about AB 617 in general. Having been able, having the amazing opportunity to work in this program and work with not only the Stockton community, but the South Central Fresno and the Shafter community, and the partner agencies that we've been involved with, like CARB and the cities and the counties and the COGS and Caltrans and in other communities like the Department of Pesticide Regulation and so many others, is that this program has brought us all together when we wouldn't have otherwise. In a lot of cases, these different agencies work very much in silos. And what we found with AB 617 is it's broken those silos down to a huge extent. And it's provided opportunities for us to have conversations with, for example, the Port of Stockton, and I know Jeff is here tonight. I'm very thankful for that. But the one thing that AB 617 doesn't do is it doesn't give any additional legal authority. So we can't we can't mandate certain people to do things. We definitely try to keep everybody involved as partners because they understand the importance and the benefit. They want to be good neighbors. They want to do the right thing. They want to improve their communities. And that's what we found through the implementation process, especially in South Central Fresno and in Shafter. And it's great to see, it's great to behold. And I look forward to that same level of commitment from our partners in Stockton. And we've seen it with several of them. I know Jeff has talked about his commitment to starting up a community engagement committee. I know everybody saw Gil from Stockton Unified and how excited he is about the potential for the programs for schools in Stockton Unified. And we know once we get to that stage, it's going to be an amazing thing. And so I just wanted that to be the context. And before we kind of talk about I know there's 3 incentive measures, but then there's also the 4th measure, which is the Community Engagement Committee measure, which really stemmed from the desire of the steering committee to be a part of what's going on at the port. We understand that there are trust issues with the port that are long-standing. We heard the steering committee. We talked with Jeff about what opportunities there were, and he recommended and he had, be honest, he had started the process, at least internal discussions with people at the port to develop a community engagement committee to get feedback, to talk to community members. And so that's what you see in the SERP, and that was presented. The other things were these emission reduction ones, and really want to thank Scott Wall for sending out. He did a lot of research, and you put some information together, and I'm sure everybody has now had an opportunity to look at the information that was sent over. And I think if you're looking at that information, the big takeaway is just the volume of emissions that come from the port and the opportunity that exists to get emission reductions, and not only criteria air pollutants, but toxic pollutants. If you look at the percentages, there's a large contribution of diesel particulate matter that comes from the port of Stockton. And we know that diesel particulate matter is a carcinogen, it's toxic, and it's just not good to breathe. And I mean, you look at some of the things that are, downwind. You have your Washington Elementary School, you have people living there that are directly impacted by that. And so there's opportunity there for that. And then I know this steering committee has been very interested in studies and wanting to better understand, what health impacts living near and around these sources present. And so a couple weeks ago, we did send it out, and I hope everybody had an opportunity to take a look at the health studies. Granted, it wasn't in Stockton, and we understand that that's a desire of the community to have more studies in the Stockton specific area. That study, though, showed that, especially when it comes to children, that there are huge negative health impacts as a result of living near a port and its operations. And so, once again, the reason why we included these in was just, it's an opportunity. What community emission reduction programs is focused on are opportunities to quickly reduce both emission reductions and exposure reductions. Understanding that the implementation period of this is such a short time frame. Even though 5 years seems like a long time, it's really a blink of an eye. So that's kind of where it came from and centered on. And at this point, I know that the steering committee sent over certain requests in regards to these measures, and I'll let Jeff Wingfield speak on the port's behalf, because really this is not the district's decision on what they can and cannot do. This is really about what the port can and can't do. And like I said, there's no legal hooks for us to require the port to do those things. And we really look on the partnerships and, on these various things. So I'll turn it over to Jeff at this point. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ryan. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to say, so Dylan and the group, I did get the email with the SERP strategy requests, and the one good thing is that we've got, the port is committed to clean air, to working with this group. I think we all share the same goals. We want to have a clean port. We want to continue to make improvements there and to have a port that provides the kind of jobs that we need, and the goods movement activities that we currently do. And there's a lot of trust issues. I mean, I've heard it time and time again throughout this whole process. And that's something that I'm committed to, and the port director is committed to working on. I had a conversation with him earlier today to kind of talk through some of these measures. And he is fully committed to supporting me in the efforts that I'm doing. I don't know if you guys followed at our board meeting, but he made an announcement last week about the status of the AB 617 group and our interest and our involvement in that. So we're all, I would hope that we could see each other on the same team, because that's what we want to do, is to help sustain the port, but also make sure that we're reducing emissions on the surrounding community and all of your children and all of your friends and family that live in that area. One other thing I did want to mention really briefly is so tonight, I feel like some of the most productive dialogue that we've had here has been just kind of question and answer sessions with the port, and us being able to share information with you guys, answer your questions. So I brought a few members of my team here tonight. We brought our Director of Operations, Jason Katindoy. We brought Joe Carrillo. He is with SSA Marine, and he is also one of our partners in our zero emission efforts. We also have Shannon Arnold and Electrify Data with Rebel Marketing. They've helped us kind of develop the outline and framework for our community outreach group, as well as Katie Chamberlain, who's with Anchor QEA, who does a lot of the port's CEQA documents, but it's also helping us with the development of and framework for the outreach group. So I just wanted to tell you and to reiterate again that the port is interested in and fully committed to outreach and setting up this group, making sure that we have meaningful dialogue, that we can talk about projects and plans and where we want to go. I want to hear what projects that you guys are interested in. We've been reaching out to a few of you during our strategic planning effort, which has been really educational for me to hear kind of the priorities from the various NGOs. And so I think that there's a collaboration just waiting to happen, because all of the things that I've heard throughout this group, and thank you for allowing me to participate in this group. But a lot of the things that you guys are talking about are things that the port we've either already started or have been doing, or are interested in doing further. And so I think there's a lot of collaborative opportunities that we can engage in. And I just wanted to say, I went through this list today. There's a lot of things that I cannot commit our port to, that I cannot speak for our port commissioners. We are a government agency. And so while the overall objectives are exactly what we are looking to address within the CEC, some of the other measures about, I'm going to go and brief the board this in the next week and see if we can provide commissioners that will be involved. I can't speak for them and say that, and I can't agree to that, tonight. There's a lot of these things that, just receiving a lot of this information, you know, there are things that we can blend into our process, but there are just some things too that I can't commit our board to. I also just wanted to mention that, you know, we've been working very hard on reducing our emissions over the past few years. We may have more percentage-wise zero emission equipment in Stockton than any other port in California and potentially the country. And that was told to me by the Port of Long Beach when we were working with them on some of our early developments. They said, wow, you guys are really going in, you're going all in on this. And thankfully, you know, with the partners of like Joe and with Jason who are helping really prioritize budgets and funding and helping me go out and find grant opportunities, we've been very successful at it. And so while I understand that you guys are looking at emission reduction measures for the port, with me not being able to commit to these things, I mean, on behalf of the board, I would just say that, you know, we're prepared to continue those efforts on our own, you know, whether in partnership with AB 617 or not. We've started these things long before this group, and we'll continue to go in that direction to create the greenest, leanest port we can make. And I just would hope that, that we could be in partnership. Ryan, do you want to open it up for any questions or anything?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Jeff, and you know, appreciate you talking about the letter that was sent out to the that we received, and I think we did share, correct, Jamie or Heather? That was, yeah. So the letter that we received from Dylan Delvo with Little Manila in regards to some proposed verbiage for measures. So what I'm hearing, Jeff, is yeah, that you cannot commit the port, and so at this point we wouldn't be able to make those changes to those measures. Correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So I think at this point, yeah, I think we can open it up, and if anybody has any questions or comments.
So I do see, Ryan, Debbie, you've had your hand up and down. I know you are having computer issues. Did you have a question still?
I do.
Okay.
I just, it's going to be a pretty simple one for Jeff. Jeff, who is the top person at the port? Is it still Phil Berelsheimer? Am I saying it right?
The port director is Richard Asheris, and then we have a board made up of 7 appointees from the County Board of Supervisors and the Stockton City Council. And the current board chair is RJ Allen.
So who was Phil Berelsheimer?
That name does not ring a bell with me.
I'm sure when I was elected to the reclamation district, I spoke with him and he was helpful to me as far as getting your guys' vote. So I thought he was the head of the port. So
no, I don't know that I've ever heard.
That was 8 years ago. So.
Well, I've been at the port for 15 years now, and
wow.
so I would have heard of him.
Huh? Weird. I think. What did you say his name was? The port. The head of the port. Now, who's the decision maker there? Is what I'm getting at.
So the board is the ultimate decision maker, the 7-member board.
Okay.
And they provide guidance and set policy for the port director, who then oversees the staff. And I think we have about 100 staff members. A good majority of them are either part of our police force or our operations group.
So is there any other other people on your board beside, you said Stockton City Council and the Board of Supervisors, you said?
Yes, 4 appointees from the Stockton City Council and 3 appointees from the Board of Supervisors.
Okay.
And if you go to our website, you can see all of the names and pictures of all of our current board.
And they're appointed by the whole board, I'm assuming, the whole Board of Supervisors, and they vote on the 4 openings or whatever that is there, and that's the way it's done, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. And then just a couple of notes of just to clarify, because I'm getting some comments in the chat. There was a letter that was sent and authored by a number of CSC members that was shared with the Air District and with the port. A copy or a link to that letter is now in the chat if you have not seen it. And it's what's been referenced and mentioned in the last few moments related to the conversation that Jeff's responding to and that Ryan's responding to. So if you are curious to know what's in that letter, Heather has posted a link to it, and what looks like it was posted for review but not sent by email. So it was not in your email, but it has been now posted, and you can look at it here with some conditions related to port participation and engagement with the port if this committee decides to move forward with including port measures in the SERP. I see Matt's hand.
Thanks, Erica, and thanks for clarifying all the incentive strategies, Ryan and Jeff. We talked a couple times, and I just want to clarify here in a public forum, just my dialogue with Little Manila, my employer, and community partners that we want to help the port be the greenest port in California, and we want to fund some of these things. There's just history that we have to address, and so obviously there's 2 tracks here, right? There's the big picture. How do you engage with the community, and how does the community feel like it's being handled authentically? And so that's sort of this community advisory committee strategy, and how how people feel like they actually have a say over what's happening in their neighborhood. And I think that's judging from my conversations with many people, most people's highest priority. I think we didn't expect you to be able to get a commission resolution within 5 days, but there needs to be some sort of strategy or discussion about how we can get some assurance of that. And then also the specific strategies, there are specific questions about those strategies. Like Ryan said, the port would pay for most of a marine bonnet, most of the other things. And so what are the drop dead milestones on funding that match funding? At which point, we're a community that has a budget, and we have to spend it appropriately. So, what's the deadline where we pivot to strategies that we know we can do in a real timeline? And I think some of the assurances we got at last week's meeting about rolling oversight and being able to meet regularly and, make that decision when it's time to turn to new strategies would give, me confidence in moving forward. But I think, we have to be able to say in this meeting that we're going to, pursue a transparent accountability strategy on community engagement in the big picture and on these specific strategies. I mean, everybody here wants to charge those trucks and wants those trucks idling on electric charging infrastructure. I don't think anybody here disagrees with that. And then, there's questions about the other 6 million. But if we can't, if we can't even sort of see that path and start walking down it, then, we've got an hour and 20 minutes to start talking about what the other incentive strategies would be outside of the port based on that history. And so that's just clarifying those 2 threads and to see if we can, recapture what's left of this meeting from, frankly, orientation and framing that could have been done in the last 13 months. And so with that, I'll let other folks talk.
Thank you, Matt. And I think what you all have heard, I think it's an interesting discussion, because what I think we've heard the CSC say is that they're really interested in authentic engagement. I'm just paraphrasing from what a lot of the comments have been. the port is interested in authentic engagement. They're working through that process, and it's not maybe at the place that I think the CSC is hoping that it would be, but there's a commitment on Jeff's part and a part of the team that he represents to continue moving that forward. And then Ryan is speaking about kind of the role of the air district and what is the parameter, what's the jurisdiction, what bandwidth do they have to kind of move that forward. And it seems like while there is philosophical agreement, there's no legal requirement that the air district can mandate any other agency to do any other thing. And so the challenge is, what does this committee do when it comes to putting teeth in its SERP that are actually binding? And that's the challenge that I think I see. And I want to be mindful, certainly of what every person's saying and paraphrase appropriately. So if I've misrepresented that, please let me know. But I think I'm hearing that there's a lot of commitment around communication and engagement and improving that as they see the need to make those adjustments. But then again, understanding where the jurisdiction lies and who's responsible for what activities and who can mandate and enforce what activities. I see Ryan's hand, and I also see Margot's hand. And Ryan, I want to allow you the opportunity to respond to someone's comment or question if it's before we take Margot, if that's something that makes sense.
No, let Margot go first.
Okay, Margot, I see your hand.
Yeah, hi. I just need to say that people put a lot of work into the wording of what they submitted for this issue, the people on the CSC, and I really, really appreciate those who did it because it wasn't me, and I just really think it was well worded. I understand Jeff's concerns that he can't make a decision for the board of the port. At the same time, the importance of getting some of these issues actually looked at by the port commissioners, getting it in front of them is really important. I appreciate that Rick Ascaris brought up AB 617 to the commissioners because when I talked to some of them in the past, they hadn't heard of AB 617. I was like, oh gosh, you guys should ask about this. And I know there's a lot to discuss at all kinds of times. I'm wondering if, because I think this wording is extremely important, and I would have a yes vote contingent on this wording. Can we make a contingent SERP? Can we put in this SERP? We would like this to move forward. We still need to negotiate or talk to the port about this, and we need to hear what they have to say and what their real concerns are about the language, because honestly, I didn't see anything in there that they might be concerned about other than a commissioner being committed to spending time with us. Maybe that was what it was, or hearing what we have to say and then bringing our voice to the actual board. So and I understand not making the decision tonight. I understand it came in late. I understand that, but the importance of it can't be negated. And I think a lot hinges on it. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Margot. I'll turn the mic over to Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, I think as an organization, we appreciate all the time that every single committee member spend on this program. We know how important it is. Any time spent on this is time away from other things like family commitments or other work, outside interests. And so, yeah, I mean, there needs to be an acknowledgement of that. And I think this conversation is definitely not, isn't about the respecting the desires or the wishes of the steering committee. It's just more focused on, hearing from Jeff and what can and can't be. And we've had the conversation, several times in the community steering committee about kind of why we come in with some language that is a little more basic in understanding that this is framework. And that there's going to be ongoing work to more fully develop these during the implementation phase. And that's why we were so excited about the recommendation for a community environmental committee composed of residents and environmental justice groups and others to be able to fully engage with members of the port who, I mean, it wasn't like, if you look at the measure, it's not like saying these are the people that's going to be involved. It could, I'm very thankful for Jeff for, you know, making the commitment to go and talk to port commissioners about trying to get them involved in that. I think there is opportunity with the way that it's presented. I understand it's not the exact language that the steering committee has proposed and is asking for, but I think, like Margot's saying, the way that it's written in there, I think that fully leaves it open for a lot of those things to happen. I would hate for the possibility of not including a measure like this in the CERP because it just seems like it meant a lot to the steering committee members. Yeah, I mean, we'll listen to the steering committee on that.
So just to center everyone and provide a status, because I've getting some questions. Currently in your CERP that's going to the Air District Board this week, there are no port measures included. And so these conversations we're having today are to decide if port measures will be included. And the language in the link that's in the chat refers to some specific requests that would be sort of the contingency for how to get those measures included. This committee's job today is to decide if that's the direction you want to go. If you want to talk about, if you want to think about the original language for the port measures and deliberate that, or whether you want to shut down conversation around including port measures in the CERP and go a different direction. So that's where this conversation is going and where the agenda item is intended to go. And to what Ryan just mentioned, you know, there is the opportunity certainly today to talk about the original measure language and discuss that and consider including that because it sounds like the port and, you know, the responsibility of Jeff is a little different than the roles and responsibility of the port board. He cannot speak for them, and certainly within the timeframes with which those decisions need to be made. But it does sound like Ryan's saying that the language in the CERP as it stands as in a draft form now could provide some flexibility for you to continue those dialogue and that conversation over time through implementation. So that's a summary for those of you that are trying to figure out what's going on and where and how. I do see two hands, one from Eric and one from Douglas. Eric, would you like to go first?
Sure. I apologize for having missed many of these meetings. I'm trying to catch up here at the very tail end. I have lived in the area just up the hill from the port near Victory Park for the last 31 years. I'm a retired city planner. I was a planner for this county as well as 2 other counties and a private planning consultant. So I've been around the track a couple times with these planning processes. My observation has been that the port has been a very, very poor neighbor for as long as I've lived in Stockton, for 3 decades. There have been numerous lawsuits filed against the port that I'm familiar with, and the port has a well-deserved reputation as being kind of a feudal kingdom unto itself. The city council and the board of supervisors rarely take any interest in really vetting candidates to fill vacancies on the port commission. Their attitude seems to be the port creates a lot of good paying union jobs. We'll just leave them alone and they can do whatever they want. We are now in a position where the port is being dragged rather rudely, like from the 1960s into the current century. And it's going to be very painful, but it's time. I totally am supportive of the language that Matt and the other folks who I hope are a majority on this committee have developed. I think the language is right on. And I hope that, frankly, we stop listening to a lot of justifications about why the port can't do this and can't do that. And I hope we move to a motion to approve the language that Little Manila and the other many organizations that are represented in this committee. I hope we move to a motion with a second and simply debate individual parts of that really key document, which I think is really well written. I don't think we have to go back and look at exactly what's in the SERP right now because it was clearly inadequate. If it had been adequate to begin with, it would not have provoked this rather good response on the part of the several agencies, of several NGOs that signed that letter. So for all, I am totally supportive of this, and I would really like someone to make a motion to move this and see if we have the votes to put this in the record.
So maybe I can address Eric's comments. Once again, going back, this body, the AB 617 doesn't give legal authority for this body to make decisions that are outside what's in the AB 617 blueprint. And so if the port is telling us that they cannot abide by the language as proposed, then we could not include it. So I think what would be the position that we would be in would be that if the decision for the steering committee is that the only language that they would be okay with and including is the language as proposed, at that point, those measures would be taken out of the SERP. And
Okay, so that's very clear, I think, Ryan. So it sounds like we cannot include this exact language as it stands because we don't have that authority as the 617 community. And so that means the choices are to either continue discussions with the port about the measures or the language of the SERP, the measures that we've seen before and maybe modifications to those, or we don't include port measures in the SERP as it stands and is going to the board, the Area District Board this week. So with that, I'm going to go to Douglas and then Barbara and then Mary Elizabeth. And then I see a number of other hands after that. And I see Deldy, and actually Deldy with CARB. I'm going to let you jump ahead just in case it's irrelevant to this conversation that we're having right now. Deldy, if you'd like to give some context from the CARB standpoint that might elucidate some of this, we'd welcome your thoughts.
No, I appreciate that, everyone, and I'm so sorry to jump ahead, but I just wanted to reflect from CARB's perspective, again, just the appreciation for everyone being here with a relatively unplanned meeting. And I also want to just appreciate the port and Jeff for bringing all of your other parties from the port to the table tonight. That's a really great sign. But I do want to just note that in a review of the document that's at the link, there is reference to a loan with use of the incentive funds that would support the purchase of the bonnet. And we have checked on that internally. That is really not anything we can do. The incentive programs are meant to be dispersed as grants, really, with matching requirements, but not as loans. So that's an issue to consider that we would ask you to think about.
Thank you, Deldy. All right, let's go to Douglas. Thank you for your patience, Douglas. Did you have a question or comment?
I just need some clarification for what's been said, and Mark doing a good job. But at the steering committee, what power do we have to making this? Because I know that we have two different groups that are in the committee, as well as resident is in the group as well. Now, at what I'm hearing, what I hearing that in support with these what they're saying, might have not put port in an agenda at all. I mean, if that's what they want, because I don't know what the history about. I don't know what's going on regarding the port history with people in the community. I'm not aware of. So I definitely think that because I noticed that there's a little bit of compromise between the steering committee and going on to another group to make the ultimate decision on for us, and I just don't think that, if we are the one that vote, are in the vote have its power for moving along instead of, 'cause I understand what Ryan's saying, that either you're gonna put it or don't put it. That's the language that I'm understanding. Is that correct?
Right. You at this point, it's almost as though there's an ultimatum. In the language that was presented in the letter, it was like, the SERP includes support if this language is adopted, and if not, it's not considered. Now, certainly the entire committee did not present that letter to the group, so it's certainly not speaking for the entire committee, and we would have to discuss and see what the numbers really are in terms of who's interested in moving forward with the PERT measure or not. But as the language is presented in the letter, it was very much about this is what language that's needed in order to include port measures in the SERP. So it's sort of an in or out.
Okay, so now, so if Matthew is asking and Dylan is asking regarding with the Port of Stockton, if they decide, well, let's remove them out of the equation, so are we going to be able to move forward to the next item, like locomotive or other stuff?
Correct. Yeah. So you all last week, the SERP moved forward with locomotives and school buses, and that is already moving forward. Today, you get to decide if you also add port measures to that document that is moving forward. So, today is really just about to add or not port measures. Currently, there are no port measures in your SERP that's going forward to the Air District Board this week. Today, you get to decide if you want to add some and what that language looks like. And Douglas stepped away, but oh, he's coming back.
I'm sorry, that somebody was bungee jumping and it overloading my sensory, so I'm sorry. So anyway, okay, so what were you saying regarding the last statement you just said?
So you get to decide today. So right now, your SERP is moving forward. It includes locomotives, it includes school buses, and every other measure that got dropped into green, the red, yellow, and green bucket. Those are all moving forward. Your SERP is going to the Air District Board later this week in an agenda packet. It'll be voted on next week. Today, this committee gets to decide if port measures also get added and which ones. So today's conversation is about whether or not to include 3 to 4 port measures, 1, 2, 3, or 4 port measures in that SERP as well. If you decide today not to include any port measures, your SERP's still moving. It's a great document. You guys approved it last week unanimously, and it's great. But today you can add port measures as well if you feel comfortable doing so.
And what is the equipment that the port measure need from us at the steering committee? What do they need? Like tub boating, or is it cleaning water from gases? What are the money that they're asking? What is the tangible thing?
Yeah, so Doug, this is kind of like what I was talking about. There was no ask made by the Port of Stockton to the Air District at any point for funding. It stemmed from, the purpose of the community emission reduction programs are to look at what the sources of pollution are in communities and look to develop strategies that will address those. And so the district went through an effort. We talked with the port. We asked for what equipment was out there. We looked at that. We said, okay, what are some of the things that could possibly be funded? Get incentives to get rid of older, dirtier equipment and replace it with new equipment. That was a process that the district went through. And so through that process, we identified a few, which was a emission control system for the ocean-going vessels. You heard us refer to it as a bonnet type system. That's one of the technologies that is possible. And then another was funding the replacement of a tugboat which is, and then lastly would be the commercial harbor equipment. There's various pieces of equipment that are used to move product in the port. And that majority of that equipment is owned by the businesses that operate at the port, as well as partners, but not necessarily the port itself. So those were the incentives that were associated with the port directly.
Okay, Douglas, did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. But I'm kind of speechless at the moment. I was kind of quiet, silent, because I don't know if what the guy who speaks representing the port of Stockton. Yeah, port.
That's Jeff.
Jeff, is Jeff still available?
He looks like he's still on the line.
I'm right here.
Jeff, what did you need at the third committee that are needed for us to allocate funds? Because I know that last week we did vote it. I know there was a line where I think it was $40,000 on a tugboat or the crane. Erica, do you remember on the budget?
For the tugboats, but yeah, the budget slide, I know that Ryan had a number of budget slides related to the emissions and the cost. Do you guys still, the Air District team, do you still have those slides that speak to the budget amount? Great, thank you. These are the reduction targets and the allocation amounts that are proposed in the current language. And it's about $5 million with the emission reductions of 101 tons.
So, and the marina exhaustion intake, is that what is that like a equipment that sucks the air out of the fume, or what?
Yeah, it's a capture and control device, a bonnet type system that would go over the stack of some of the vessels that would essentially act as a scrubber to reduce the emissions that are coming out of vessels that are at berth at the port.
Well, I would like to move that toward move that.
Thank you for that comment, Douglas. I want to acknowledge that there's a lot of hands up right now. And so what I'm going to do is there's a few people that I never hear from that I'd love to hear from today. I also want to give Karen Buckley with CARB and Jeff Wingfield a chance to respond to some of the comments and questions that have come up. So maybe we start with Jeff, since we're talking about the port quite a bit. Did you want to go first, and then I'll go to Karen, and then we'll go to some of those others that I haven't seen in a long time, and it's great to see your hands up.
Well, thank you. It was just really to address the question about, what's the port asking for? And the port isn't asking for anything. We didn't really ask to be put into the SERP. We're going to continue on the path that we're on, whether or not we're with, we get funding from AB 617 or not. We have got plans to move forward with all of the technology and all of the equipment at the port. It's just going to take time. Our budget, I think overall is $50 million annually. So I think last year we got about $2 million to go towards the Zanzef project that brought in about 35 zero and near zero emission pieces of equipment. So, and the other thing I want to let you know is that whether or not you approve the CERT measures with the port, we're still going to do the community outreach. We are committed to that. It's something that until I heard from you guys over this last year, I didn't realize that there was a huge desire for the community to have that input. But I've learned a lot from you guys, and I'm understanding that there is, and I think that there's a lot we can learn from each other.
Great, thank you, Jeff. And then just really quickly, Karen, did you have a comment that relates to this conversation before we jump into the other queue?
Sure, I'll be quick. And for the reg team that's listening to me on my side, if I mess this up, please let me know. I wanted to talk about the technology just a little bit for the control and capture piece of it. Let's remember that there's the two types of vessels that come in. So you've got your bulk ships, and then you've got your tanker ships. And the bulk ships don't have a regulatory requirement to clean anything up at this point. They have activity issues that makes it challenging with existing technologies to allow them to be able to use the bonnet. Basically, you would have to take it on and off several times because the ships move back and forth within the berth. So there's that part. Now, for the tankers, the first regulatory deadline is 2027. And because they are bigger ships, the equipment is substantially more expensive. So while we have some money you guys have some money you can put in to help them upgrade earlier, eventually they will have to do it themselves if you decide not to. The other factor to consider, the technology is super new for these types of ships, and the vessel owners themselves could choose not to use the equipment. So there is that piece of it as well. So I just wanted you guys to have a little bit of that background as well. So maybe you do focus on things that are in more of our kind of, I don't want to say control, but a little bit more, I don't know, baked, I guess we could say. Like, we know there's you can get electric cargo handling equipment that you can fund. We know that will go ahead and you could do it right away. So, and the other part of incentives, and I know Ryan talked about this a little bit, was that, we can offer them incentive money, but the port might choose not to participate. I've worked in programs before where we've done some with locomotives, and they'll ask how much we're going to provide and say it's 50% of a $5 million locomotive. And they may say, that's not enough money, we're not going to participate. So I'm not saying that's what the port will do, but they certainly do have that option. So I really hope that helps you guys.
Thank you for that context, Karen. And I want to go to Barbara, and then I do see a number of other hands, so I just want to acknowledge I see you. Thank you for keep them up. Don't lower them. I'd like to make sure I keep everybody on the queue. And Barbara, if you had a comment or question, thanks for your patience.
You're welcome, and thank you. Can you hear me okay? I'm having a little bit of internet difficulty, and that is why my screen isn't up. I apologize.
No problem. And Ryan,
Okay.
Ryan, did you want to stop share? Are you still sharing your screen? Or did you want? Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we need an extension on SERP approval after hearing how the conversation is unfolding. I empathize with Jeff that he can't make a commitment without a vote from the port and going back to port commissioners. It's a government agency. From what I'm seeing at this point in the process, I think the problem is that we got the most important key pieces of information 2 weeks ago, 12 months into the process. The outreach probably should have started much earlier between the port and community groups. And I think that Valley Air didn't really fully facilitate that. I think because Stockton is the exception in the Valley. We're the only port city. So I think they've been struggling on how to work with a port city. And then of course, there's been our own internal work as a large committee as to what should be the priority for mitigating and really getting back to the best outcomes for what we need. I think that you can, if CARB would allow for an extension, I think it would allow for a few more group meetings with the port directly to see what can be worked in. I understand that you cannot bring in items into the SERP that are outside of the process, but I think that there's a way for the community to feel good about what goes into the SERP if a really good agreement is reached with the port about next step measures for a long-term strategy. We could have the conversation open and get a more solid commitment. And when we have that from them, then we can go ahead and feel comfortable about how funding is really approved. I think we want to get it right. And there's nothing wrong with a lot of money at stake and a lot of time from people putting in 4 or 6 more weeks. If some of this can be played out and finalized a little bit better, I think for every group to kind of move forward and be ready to go for it. You know, I guess I'll just leave it right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I want to give Ryan a chance to respond to that. So Ryan, can you, I see your hand.
I think, you know, I completely understand what Barbara's talking about. And, you know, through this process, it's definitely been one where and it's not just limited, it's not, you know, an issue that only Stockton is dealing with. That there are definite challenges with just the legislation as it's written, and you're trying to get done this enormous amount of work, and the timing of things, and trying to develop strategies that address the community, working with the community steering committee members to develop strategies. The thing is, and the issue is, you know, we as a group made a commitment to have a CERT finalized, and so appreciative of this group voting to approve the CERT last week. At this point, you know, we're already operating outside of law. I mean, the law said we had to have this done within 12 months. Now, there were some extenuating circumstances with COVID and other things, and wanting to be true to the process and listening to the steering committee members, we did ask, and we consulted with the steering committee on the extension, and we obtained a 3-month extension, which, you know, we're at the point now where you know, we need to finish this, and we need to, you know, take a CERP, you know, to a first our board, and then obviously to CARB, and you know, we discussed the importance of in the language of some of these strategies. Once again, not including all the specifics, because that gives us latitude to work within those areas on what the steering committee still wants. I hope it doesn't just hinge on if the specific language, which then locks you into like that's it. And then if we ever wanted to make any changes to it, then potentially that has to go back before boards, and it adds an additional layer of administrative involvement, that by having measures that are a little more open, that it gives this committee a lot more latitude to work with all the partner agencies on the implementation side. What I'm hearing is, you know, with the measure as proposed, it doesn't limit any of the desires of the steering committee. Everything that the steering committee is asking for are things that they could continue to work with the port on getting through that measure. It's not, I would hope that the steering committee doesn't view it as that it's not a desire for us to want to work with the steering committee. I think throughout this process, as an organization, we've looked to find ways to say yes to the steering committee. And we incorporated things that are completely outside of our you know, what we are typically, you know, have done as an organization, as an agency, like I said, and you know, we bring in partners that we haven't normally worked with. I mean, that is AB 617. And you know, understanding that over these next 5 years, that's where we're going to spend a lot of time in developing these, in taking these from concepts to reality. But it's hard when you try to kind of outline all the specifics on what you want, and you know, make the request that is what has to be in there. I think that's where it would be hard. And so my request is if the steering committee wants to have you know, the community involvement, definitely have a measure in there, you know, and then work towards getting the things that you want through the community steering committee process. Develop a subcommittee, like as one of the first actions. Develop a subcommittee. Let's meet with the port. Try to get those things that you're asking for. There's nothing that has been proposed that would prevent that. That's the key thing. I could see if there was like that there was an opportunity, that I think in that case, I would completely understand the frustration of the steering committee, and we're definitely trying to, like I said, stay true to this process. At the same time, be very honest with the steering committee. We don't want to be in a position where we're over promising and under delivering. I want to be honest with the committee on what we can and can't do.
Thanks, Ryan. I see Jeff's hand, and because so many people are talking about the port, I want to give the port a chance to respond. Jeff, did you want to respond to some of the comments and questions and feedback you've heard so far?
I have heard a lot about the mistrust and concerns with the port, and heard Eric's comments earlier. I at some point in the future, I'd like to learn more about that. I've been with the port for 15 years, and in Stockton, and working with the port for about 18 years, and I just have not seen a lot of that go on. And so I'm interested to, it's probably not a good time right now, but I'm just telling you, I'm coming from a place where I have not understood exactly the origin of all of that mistrust. I think that anybody talking about, working with the port recently would hopefully say the opposite, but that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so what I think I'm hearing Ryan say is, it's important to continue the process moving forward. There are options to continue discussions about the port within the current framework and within the current timelines, from what I'm understanding. If there is generic language dropped into the SERP, that can continue to be refined during the implementation stage. And again, if I'm speaking out of turn or not articulating something correctly, stop me. But what I'm hearing is there are opportunities to continue the dialogue with the port. But the choice you guys get to make today is to include port measures or not include port measures. And if you include port measures, it needs to be done in the context of the current draft language that's listed there, or maybe something even less, so you have some flexibility to make some adjustments. I think there's a lot in the chat. Some people are very much in favor of moving the current SERP forward as originally scheduled, and then not including port measures. Others want to discuss it. I think we will likely need to take a vote on this. I see lots of hands, and I want to acknowledge Mary Elizabeth is first in my queue, so I want to give her a chance to speak. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. So I'm just wondering if it might be possible for us to have a simple statement that explicitly expresses the desires of the steering committee for increased Stockton Port Commission commitments leading to a greener port. Open enough to, like be like a mission call that, that's what our desire is for interactions with the port. And that I would definitely be in favor of including those emissions in this draft. Thank you.
Thanks. I do see Jessica's hand. I want to give her a chance to respond in case she's got some subject matter expertise to lend to this conversation. Jess?
I was just going to offer, just as a quick example, just to kind of support a lot of that vague or open language. This is something we've done in both of our other SERPs that have gone through, and really with a lot of success, not knowing how it was going to work in Shafter, for example, with the Department of Pesticide regulations. We put in language that we were going to continue to work, that we had some funding set aside for some specific programs, but knowing that it would take, at best, I think a lot of the chat is saying, it might just take a few weeks, but that's not as certain. And so even if there was room, which we know that there's not, to push this back, we don't necessarily know what that feedback timeline is. But putting in language that allows us to, work through implementation has gotten us really far with other SERPs, with even bigger agencies than the port, with a statewide pesticide regulation agency. So just kind of to continue supporting that this is something that we're familiar with, and we want to continue to work with the CSC on pushing forward. Just putting it in the SERP, really holds us as a CSC and a district responsible for making sure we follow through with that. and keep pushing the port measure forward.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, Jess, what you're saying is that in lieu of the 3 measures that we're considering, you would do one generic measure related to port engagement and how you would continue working with the port on certain specific items. And then you leave flexibility to define that and the budget. Is that what you're saying?
I'll let Ryan say. I wasn't necessarily saying that. I mean, that's definitely a possibility, though. I think it could be, but I think even with those measures in there as described, you know, knowing that we need to still work forward on the implementation and that back and it sounds a lot like it's really the commitment and the feedback from the port that we would still work on with that outline language that's already in the measure in the SERP.
Got it. So using the existing 3 measures and just adding language about sort of coordination. Okay. I see lots of hands, and I want to make sure that Taylor, Tina, Debbie, I see your hands. I want to give Delby a chance from CARB to communicate as well, just provide additional context, and then I do want to do a time check for everyone too, just to make sure that we continue to move forward, given that we're ending at 7 today and not 7:30. Delby.
Yeah, I just wanted to support the conversation. I think it feels like we're at a little bit of a turning point. It feels like we have all the right ingredients. We have the port at the table. We have some very specific concrete ideas from many of the community steering committees members about what they want to see. We have a wonderful SERP that's already been approved. Now I think what we're talking about is how do we give the current SERP room to grow in the direction we want it to grow, which is to, as you all have articulated, how can we work together with the port to help make it the greenest port in the world, right? Why not? Let's say that. So what do we need to have in that language in the SERP, because the SERP is a living document that we could actually agree to right now. And I just want to say for the record that it's our hope at CARB that we are able to move forward in that direction. You know, there was talk about the delay and you know, waiting. I'll just be real honest with you. The process that CARB uses after we receive the board approved SERP from the district, we take the full 60 days that we are allowed in the blueprint to do our own review, to do our own workshop. That does take time. And so it sounds like it might just be a few weeks, but in fact, you know, we are talking about a longer time frame. So there is interest in moving ahead.
Thank you, Delby. Taylor, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to reiterate some of Barbara's points, some of the points I've heard on this call already. And Delby, yes, absolutely, we're interested in cleaning up our air, and we understand that like timelines might have an impact on that. I also want to share that the port emissions that the port made available to us was made available. The final report was made available to us 8 days ago, 13 months into this process. So I'd like to just flag to I want to say now, speaking to my fellow CSC members, that is any delay of this process is not your fault. And I'd also like to say that there are 21 voting members of the CSC who have approved the language that Dylan and Matt and folks at Little Manila put forth. So that is the will of the steering committee in the majority. It's 50% plus one and then some. And just want to share, you know, I understand that there is a possibility that the timeline might impact the way that we spend these funds, but I would prefer to get this thing right. And if that means delaying by 4 weeks, and actually I'll end my comment with a question directed at Jeff. Jeff, how long would it take for you to pose this question to the Port Commission and for us to get an answer?
Matt or Taylor, thanks for the question. So the reason, just to respond about the emission inventory, you know, we had started working on that prior to a lot of this going on, and I mentioned that I think back in October that I wish that thing was, you know, advanced 6 months ahead of where it was, but by that time we were already in the process, and that's where it came out. And Barbara, I agree that, you know, a lot of the timing is not ideal for these different processes that are going on. to answer your question about the board, I mean, I might be able to have some information within a week, but I can't guarantee that. I would do my best to make that happen, but there are you know, issues outside of what I can control to get that information. But I would hope I could get it within a week.
Okay, so I thank you for that, Jeff. Thank you for your comment, Taylor. I see a number of comments in the chat that I want to acknowledge as well. If you're not reviewing the chat, please take a look. There's notes from a number of people about kind of the context of this discussion, and really thinking about whether or not you want to include port measures in this current version or not. And certainly we have that opportunity. Moving forward, I see Tina and Debbie and Shannon. Shannon, I know you're representing the port. I don't want to delay for giving Tina the comment, but Shannon, did you have something specific as it relates to those port comments that have been made, and did you still want to make that comment?
Yeah, and I can keep it brief so others can have time. I just wanted to let everyone know that while we're still forming the details around the community group and how that communication channel will work, we have created new communication pathways that you can communicate directly with us, us being the port and the extended team. So it's on the port website. You can get in touch through the context section. You can fill out information about what your feedback is. If you have a question, a concern, something very specific, you can put that into the form, and then that goes directly to Jeff's team. You could also subscribe to the newsletter, where you'll receive emailed notifications about updates at the port. And then there's also a new search bar. So we tried to improve the navigation of the website. So if your questions are specific to, let's say, a CEQA project, you can type in on the search bar and try to find that information more easily. So we are trying to actively listen to the feedback we're receiving from this group and from other community groups, and implement changes as quickly as we can. So if there's more that we can do, please feel free to reach out to us through those platforms, and we'll continue to do our best.
Thank you. I want to give Ryan a chance to talk, and then I'm just going to acknowledge that in the interest of time, we're going to take these last three comments from Tina, Debbie, Joe, and Nate, 4 comments, and then we're going to close this conversation and vote as needed. So Ryan, would you like to answer a question or comment?
Yeah, I've seen comments about, talking about delays, and I shared with the committee. I mean, last week, through a 29-0 vote, I mean, the committee approved the SERP, and understanding that they decided to push the discussion for the port measures. The conversation around not having the entirety of the data with the Port of Stockton, we worked with the port to get that, like the initial emissions out to the steering committee in January. So as far as like the general emissions from the various operations at the port, the committee has had that information, and we covered it in a steering committee. We talked about it back in January.
The other group that we were going to have entertain it, but they would have had the floor.
Thank you. So that information had been shared. Now, granted, the timing of the final report wasn't ideal, but at the same time, once again, we wanted to be honest and truthful and share all the information that we have with the steering committee. That report could have come out 2 weeks after the SERP was approved. With this process, the AB 617 process, there's going to be lots of information that's going to continue to come in, that's going to continue to inform decisions, whether it's air monitor data or other things. It's going to continue, and that's why Deldy talked about it. I know we've talked about it, that this is a living document that we can continue to work on over time. And to Taylor's point of wanting to get it perfect, we could spend the next 5 years on just putting together the document, and it's not going to be perfect. We've put together, through the work of this steering committee, a great SERP. Now, there's a possibility of getting more emission reductions, which is great, But even if those emission reductions aren't part of this SERP, you're still getting I think 800 tons of emission reductions through the proposed measures, plus huge levels of exposure reductions in this SERP. It's a great SERP. Everybody should be proud of the time and effort that they put into putting the document together. And I think that's reflected through the fact that the steering committee voted 29-0 to approve it last week.
Thank you, Ryan. So there's a number of comments about moving forward. Certainly there are a number of people that signed on to that letter, but I do want to make some clarifying comments. There were a number of people that signed on for that SERP, some of which were CSC members and some of which were alternates. We would have to take a formal vote in a meeting for that to be an active and valid sort of motion by the committee. And so I want to be thoughtful about that and certainly acknowledge all of the work that went into the time that went into certainly moving that letter forward. But we do need to have a formal conversation and discussion at the committee level for that to be valid based on the charter that you all agreed to at the beginning of the CSC development. Tina Lau, I see your hand, and then Debbie. And then we'll if we've got time, we'll continue, but I know that this meeting is ending at 7. And so we want to move forward and then also talk about the other language as well.
So
Tina.
Thanks. I had 2 questions. The first is, what is the tonnage reduction for the port measures compared to the other categories? I don't know if you have something like that handy, just so we know sort of what the impact of those could be.
The overall emission reductions from all the measures, including the port ones, would be 918 tons. Without the port measures, it'd be 817 tons. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, the SERP is still really good. I mean, it's fantastic. I think it's still the best SERP. But if there's more opportunity for more emission reductions with the inclusion, I mean, it's a ninth of the possible emission reductions.
And then the second question I have is, if we put in sort of a generic, or not generic, but like an overarching mission statement or something similar to what Mary Elizabeth said, what would it look like then in the next steps for us to get into more detailed action items? Would funding not be dispersed until those specifics would be agreed upon? Or what's the mechanism for the next step if we were just to do an overarching theme?
Similar to what Mary Elizabeth talked about as part of, I don't know what that would look like. I mean, is that part of that, the community environmental committee and just adding that verbiage, or to the port, the general port section, just including some language to that effect?
Almost like a placeholder, like, there will be port projects to be agreed upon at a later time, but then at least the SERP can get finalized, and all the regulatory timelines can be met, but then we have more time to figure out some of the details on the specific projects.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we could put together a generic port emission reduction measure, and then just talk about the involvement of the community steering committee, in discussing possible projects. So there's not anything specific. So I mean, if the main concern is that the steering committee just believes that the district, if it's in there, we're going to fund it. By removing the specificity and saying that we'll work with the steering committee on what those specific measures look like, we could do something like that. And at least that way, I mean, there's funding committed in here. It still gives the steering committee more opportunity to discuss what the funding opportunities look like, and without being specific. So if that adds a level of comfort to the steering committee members, we would be open to that.
So it sounds like a compromise could be that there is generic language about the port dropped into the SERP that's going to the board this week that basically gives you the flexibility to adjust, to allocate budget and decide exactly what those implementation measures might be and how you might work with the port. So it's not super specific yet, but it gives you the flexibility and it leaves the door open to continue to have conversations with the port and to decide on incentive measures with the port over the course of your implementation timeframe. So that is an option as a compromise to include the port to include something about the port in your current SERP without feeling too structured and pigeonholed into a certain measure. I forgot, and please forgive me, Ned. I think that you had your hand up, and I took you off the queue, and then I'll go Ned and then Debbie. Oh, sorry, Nate, not Ned.
Yeah, I didn't know if you meant me or Ned Leva.
No,
Okay,
no,
and I
no,
know
you,
Ned
Nate.
quite well,
All
by
I
the
can
way.
see is an N.
Yeah,
I just saw the N on my screen.
I'm going to be very brief and concise. I think the SERP has many great and innovative measures that deserve a chance to be tried while we have the funding and the framework to do it. There's over 24 great measures in the SERP. It was approved 29-0 last week. We do not need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Regardless of the history of the Port of Stockton, the measures for the port are very problematic, although I'm perfectly okay with the generic language just mentioned. SERP is a big win for Stockton if we do it as it is now. The port can be dealt with in other ways. I mean in a nice way when I say that. The port can be worked with SJCOG, the City Council, the County Board of Supervisors, and many other ways other than SERP. The port does not have to be an end-all for the SERP report. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. All right, Debbie, and then Jose and Dylan, and then we will close out with we need to vote and move on. Jose, or sorry, Joe.
Oh, I thought it was me.
Sorry, Debbie, your hand went down. My bad. Debbie,
No.
you're next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think we need to incorporate a statement, not a specific statement, a generic statement saying that we want the port to continue with their greener measures. We would like to be involved with that and leave it at that. We, as Ryan said, we can't do specifics. We can't hold anyone responsible and say you have to do this or else. It's not that kind of document. So I just believe that we have to remember what this is all about. It's about getting cleaner air for this area. I know I'm looking forward to a cleaner port because I'm right across the street, basically. And I would like to see those measures put in. And I hope everyone will consider that tonight.
Thanks, Debbie. Joe, and then Dylan, and then we're going to take a vote and decide how we're going to move forward with the port measures before we move into the language.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Just wanted to add in. I've been living in the area in the region. I've been here since 2000, end of 16, December, and basically I work for SSA Marine. We're a global terminal operator, and we have projects in California all over, from LA Long Beach to Oakland and in Stockton. And just wanted to add to this, as someone said earlier, it's you know, a lot of these things we're doing for myself in Stockton is we don't have a date. We don't have a date to implement any zero emission cargo equipment like the Port of Long Beach and LA have like a 2030 plan. At the Port of Stockton, we don't have a date yet. And but we found out it was that important to start moving in this direction. The organization I work for, as well as partnering with the Port of Stockton to move into the zero emission category with forklifts. So that being said, is we have worked with the port and the state CARB board as well to see how we can move that direction, and we've been successful. And these are things that a lot of these equipments are 2 times and 3 times the price.
Thank you, Joe. All right, so I see Dylan's hand, and then we're going to go back to Ryan, and then we're going to take a vote. I want to be mindful of the time, and I'm going to ask for Dylan's comment or question. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Erica. You know, this meeting has been extremely just so heartbreaking because, I mean, and I hate to single you out. I mean, Shannon, you know, your responses are just completely tone deaf to what our community has been saying. This is not about a website. This is about the fact that port commissioners are refusing to read public comment from people like Mary Elizabeth, who's put hours upon hundreds of hours getting involved to try to create a more better air in our community and more and some respect for the environment. You know, we've been involved in this for 1 year and 3 months, and at any time there could have been some kind of discussion. We've all been at this table with steering committee members and the port, and you know, in 2019, the Port of Stockton, CAFR, your net position was $192,171,000. You know, it's sad that they're spending it on consultants that are tone deaf, and when there's, you know, other folks that can maybe, you know, work better so that our communities can actually work together. We want to work with you. We want a green port. We know the port cannot move. And so definitely we want a better port, but never through this process did one port commissioner even attend this meeting, any of these meetings. A port commissioner came to Little Manila's Community Showcase in 2017, and they can't come to one of these meetings, right? I think in the end, this is just about, will we as a community ever have any respect, right? Or any actual care? Will we be anything more to you than second-class citizens? The Crosstown Freeway was built and through communities of color and destroyed our communities and are still killing people that live next to those freeways today in order so there'd be a pathway to the Port of Stockton. Jeff, if you don't understand that history and what we're reacting to, then I hope this is an education, and we want to work with you. And like I said, I think I'm extremely glad that you're at the table and you're a part of this, but this is a really reaction to your bosses. And so I think I just hope that there was respect. We don't even know if the port commissioners know we exist. I think they do. So if we do exist, do they care? That's something that none of us have an answer to. And I just wish that there would be a better outcome from this. But I would like to ask Jeff, I mean, what are the points that are workable, right? I don't think the intention of this was really to create something in the CERT, but really this was about to create an open door with the Port of Stockton. And make a statement on how we can move forward together as a community. I think if anything, this AB 617 process has allowed us to have a community voice to meet and understand other residents that care deeply about this community and our environment and want a better port. And we want to continue to engage. What this ask is just a continuance of engagement with the Port of Stockton, end of the day. And we know that's going to be a process. So yeah, I think that's a thing. And I think, Tina, I think your question is interesting about wanting to know the effects when we still don't know the effects with your company's expansion of the port to our health, to the health of our community. So I think, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So thank you for that comment, Dylan. And I just want to acknowledge that I hear the passion and the concern and the frustration in your voice. And I think a lot of people do. I certainly think that Jeff and the port team have heard that as well. And Shannon, who's new to this meeting, is certainly, I think, hearing and feeling and understanding what many of you are experiencing. One of the things that I've heard that's really jumping out at me is that you all want to work with the port. It's really important to you, and that dialogue continues. And so think about that as you think about where you move forward in just a few moments, because leaving that door open to have those conversations and building that into your SERP may be an important part of what you think is a successful objective for this SERP. So I definitely want to be mindful of that if you think about adding that and to flag that for this committee, as I see it in the chat, and I see a lot of you saying that in some way. And Dylan so articulately did say, you just wanted to have a conversation and you wanted to build that relationship and to grow that and make it better. Jeff, close us out with a comment, and then Ryan, it's you.
Oof. Dylan, I just...
If you had your hand up, I just wanted to make sure you wanted to speak.
Sure, I did. Dylan, I understand. I understand kind of where you're coming from. And yes, there were injustices. I watched the first few meetings of this AB 617 group and the history and the redlining and everything that went into, holding people down and where they put their houses and they couldn't get loans. It was heartbreaking. But I don't know I think from here now, we want to figure out how to make it better. That's where I'm coming from. And I can't speak for my port board. I have brought up the issue of the comments. The response has been that, they're not singling out this group. They're not singling out any group. It's the direction that they are taking right now during COVID, and they welcome, when the pandemic's over, to have people come and give comments in person. And I'll continue to bring that up. I will continue to bring it up, but I can't answer and be held accountable for, that, unfortunately. What I can be held accountable for is my commitment that I've made to you in this group, that I will continue to work with you, that I will continue to have open, transparent dialogue about where the port wants to go, projects that we can work on together, and to do what we all are here to do, and that's to reduce emissions. I think the port has shown our commitment so far, not only by me being here every time, and putting up with a lot of not so favorable comments, but also by our track record. We've put to use more zero emission equipment than I think any other port in California. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to move forward. It's not cheap. We still do have guidelines that the commission sets about days of cash and things like that. So yes, there is different guidelines but our overall budget is what, 50 million a year, something like that. So to spend, $2 to $4 million on some of this newer equipment to support, and to push us beyond kind of our comfort zone. When we went in, we didn't know if this equipment was going to work. There were a lot of us on the staff saying, man, our fingers are crossed because we don't know how labor is going to respond to it. We don't know how, the whole infrastructure portion of it, to go in and put in miles of electrical service and chargers and all of that stuff. It takes a lot. And the guys who are here today, they've all worked with us very hard to navigate a lot of different hurdles to make this happen. So I would say that our track record, we've proven it more than anybody in the region that we are committed to reducing our emissions and to making a positive change for this community. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, I want to be mindful of time. We are well over time on this agenda item, but it's incredibly important that you are all able to have this conversation at this time before we move forward. I want to close it out with Ryan, and then we're going to take a vote on whether port measures are included in the SERP. Ryan.
Yeah, so twofold. I want to thank Dylan and all the things that he brought up and the openness. Once again, kind of going back to why that we have a measure in here and why you want to include things in SERPs. It's to have something in writing documenting the desire of the steering committees. And you talk about having a voice, and I think what's in the SERP right now when it comes to the Community Environmental Committee, that's an opening. And I want to fully explore that with the committee in elevating and raising their voices and being heard. And talking with Jeff, that's exactly what he's striving for as well. And so just kind of, I don't want to reiterate or continue to repeat myself, but I think that the measure as far as that, it's totally open to the things that you proposed. And let's work on getting the things that you want through that and desire, and really make that the model for community and port engagement. And I know working with this committee, based on how passionate they are and the desire, that I think we can get there. And then lastly, I worked up, if the committee still wants to consider, incentive measures for the port, instead of being specific, we made it more general. So that way, I mean, there's nothing that is blanket approved. It's very clear in the language that this is just any possibility of incentivizing anything at the port would be done working with the port, CARB, and especially the CSC. And so at that point, this is another option without specifically providing funding for anything. So it just really gives more opportunity for steering committee members in the district and those other people to discuss what options are available and what the committee wants to look at. And in this case, it would reserve the money in the SERP for those measures, which I think hopefully everybody sees as a good thing.
I'd like to make a motion that we vote on exactly what Ryan said, that we have that language in there, and that we vote on whether to have the port things in there or not. So I'd like to make that a motion that we vote on it.
Great. And to clarify, Debbie, your motion means the generic language that Ryan just mentioned. Great. Just for formality, do we have a second? I see Nate's hand. Nate's seconding, Debbie, and so we're going to move forward with a roll call vote. That votes, a yes vote would mean that we include the port measure, the generic port measure, in the SERP that's moving forward to the Air District Board this week. A no vote means we do not include any port measures in the SERP. We do not add them. And this is the language that Ryan, did you mean to share that screen, Ryan, or no?
That one, yeah. I think, well, I don't
there
know.
We go.
I thought that's what Taylor had asked for.
This is the generic language, and the measure is listed on the screen, and the specifics of the vote that we're going to take as a roll call vote are noted in the chat. A yes vote means we include this generic port measure language with the SERP that's moving forward this week. A no means there would be no port measures in the SERP.
Also the community environmental committee, that measure. So there were two measures. There was
two measures.
The community engagement measure, and then this one.
And they would both be in the yes vote, both of those would be included. Okay, I'm gonna ask Hannah and Kim to do the voice vote and track that, and then share the tallied results. And then alternates, as a reminder, You vote if your main person is not on the line. So the primary will get the first option and the alternate will get the second option. We will call the primary first, and if the alternate is here in their place, you will have that opportunity. All right, ladies, move forward.
Okay, I'm going alphabetically by first name. So Anthony Macias.
Hearing none.
Okay.
To be clear, really quickly, I think there's, oh, sorry. There's a couple things. Anthony Macias is on, and now I think he said no. That means what you're voting on. A yes vote means we include this generic port measure, which is listed on the screen, as well as a measure about community engagement. And then a no vote means that you do not include any port measures in your SERP. Anthony Macias just voted
no.
Voted no.
Okay. And then we have Arlene Galindo, which yes. Okay. Great. Bianca Mendoza. You're here. I see that you are here. Maybe you're having trouble unmuting. So you can also type your answer into the chat.
Sorry to interrupt, but can we put the language for the second component also up? It's kind of hard to vote on something when only one of the language is up.
Your district team, do you have that language?
And we probably cannot share two screens at the same time.
Yes, and well, I think it's P1 in the SERP.
It's P1.
And then just while we're pulling this up, I want to acknowledge from a time check standpoint, we are almost at 7. We do need a little bit more time to finish this deliberation. It is an important conversation, so we will be going over 7 to make sure that you all have the chance to make the decision that you want.
I think
that said, we will try and go as quickly as possible.
Ryan, if you can zoom in to where it says the measure would include the following, I think that would help. It's a little small. There we go.
This is the second half of the language that would be included with a yes vote. And then I can read it for everyone. Establishing a recurring CEC in 2021 to build collaboration and improve dialogue between concerned citizens in the community and environmental justice organizations to allow them a forum to raise awareness of health-related concerns regarding emissions from existing and future operations at the Port of Stockton. The goals of this CEC will be to encourage additional community engagement, bring community insights to the Port's environmental and improvement efforts, and work on select environmental projects within the Port's jurisdiction to help preserve, protect, and improve the environment. Prospective future projects that would be brought before the CEC include discussion of the future Port projects, Port of Stockton emission reduction strategy development, environmental event planning, community outreach support, and program development. So that's a measure that's related to community engagement and dialogue and collaboration with the Port, in addition to the generic language that Ryan put on the screen, which it's hard to put up both sides at once. But this is the language related to the CEC, Community Engagement Committee, Community Environmental Committee.
Okay. And Erica, are we comfortable moving forward? I'm seeing there was some confusion, so hopefully that helped clear things up.
I'm hopeful.
Regina did raise the question on whether you can vote on individual ones. So, I mean, if we can change the voting structure to allow people to vote yes or no on each of them.
So right now we're voting whether or not to include any port measure or not. And what you're asking is if we can divide the 2 port measures as well?
Yeah.
Yes. I'll ask Kim and Hannah if they can do simultaneous tracking.
So maybe just do one at a time.
Maybe, yes, let's do
Yeah.
one at a time to avoid confusion. It's gonna be easier. And then we can
Yeah,
have
I think it's
displayed on the screen when we vote.
Yeah, I think we might need to do the yes to the port language, yes or no. And then if it's a no, then there's no need to do the port language conversation. So maybe we continue with the current structure, and then we'll decide on if we move forward with a yes, which port measures, both or one, get added. Does that make sense?
It does, Kim. We're comfortable tracking this way because we would have to switch between two spreadsheets.
Yeah, so right now we're going to stick with the current motion, which is to have a port measure in the SERP or no port measure. And then we'll do a second vote on if it's a yes with the port measures, then which ones. And so to answer Dylan's question, if the vote is no, can the community reallocate those funds to other measures? And the answer we found out was not a one-to-one allocation. Dylan, you cannot automatically reassign that to other measures. It's a little bit more of a complicated formula.
Okay.
Okay, so the
sorry, you want to go ahead one more
So the
time?
motion on the table currently, and we're going to stick with it, the first and the second, we're going to stick with that, which is to include port measures or not. Right now, the yes vote would be to include a port measure that includes the CC and the generic language that you saw on the screen in the PowerPoint. We will go in and have a second vote if the yes vote passes, which specifies one or both of those pieces of language get included. So right now it's port measure yes, no port measures is no.
Okay, and just to recap, Anthony Macias, are you still a no?
I'm still a no.
Okay. Arlene Galindo, yes.
Arlene Galindo, yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Bianca Mendoza, if you're able to unmute.
Yeah, sorry, I was having trouble earlier, but I vote no.
Okay. Catherine Garupa White.
No.
Debbie Provost.
Yes.
Okay, great. Douglas, do we still have you on the line? Maybe not. Okay. Ed Ward.
Yes.
And SB Vielma.
SB Vielma, yes.
And do we have Jean Fuss on the line? Okay. Florence Quilantang. Okay.
I vote no.
No. Glenabelle Toreno. Or Gloria Alonso Cruz. Okay. Irene Kalimlim.
I vote no.
Jennifer Flores.
No.
Jonathan Pruitt.
No.
Nate Knott.
I vote yes.
Kenda Templeton.
No.
Kevin Amen.
No.
Leonard Seawood. Not sure he's still with us. Margot Prouse.
Yes.
Maria Cardenas.
Yes.
Mariah Looney.
No.
Mary Elizabeth.
Yes.
Matt Holmes.
No.
Missy Ray Magdalera.
No.
Nayeli Cruz Gomez. Ned Leba. Oh, Leonard, I see that you got unmuted.
Did you hear me?
I can hear you, Ned, yes.
Okay.
What was your vote, Ned? Sorry.
My vote is yes.
Okay, great. And sorry, Leonard, I see you were able to unmute.
Yes, this is Leonard. I voted no.
Okay, thank you. Let me just update that. Okay, Nicholas Hatton. No. Noemi.
I vote no.
Paulette, if you're here. Regina Griffin.
No.
Stacy Paniasi.
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Thank you. Sylvia Cantu.
No.
Taylor Williams.
No.
Tina Lau.
Yes.
Vanessa Palomares.
I vote no.
And Victoria Moreno.
No.
And is there anybody that I missed? I think I got you all, but if you were unable
Let me clarify the process. You should have if you were an alternate, you should have voted when your primary's name was called. So if anybody is an alternate that did not vote when their primary's name was called, if that primary is not in attendance tonight, now is your chance to speak up and tell us who you were voting for.
This is Eric. I presume that my primary is either Mary Elizabeth or Margot. So.
Yes, it's Mary Elizabeth. So we
Good.
have your vote.
So I don't get to vote on this. Go ahead.
Yes. Are there any other alternates that are voting for their primaries that are not in attendance tonight?
So this is Cynthia Lau. My primary is Esperanza Villalma, so I voted on her behalf earlier when her name was called.
Thank you. That's exactly what you were supposed to do. And is there anyone whose mute did not work or mics did not work and need a chance to be counted now? Did anyone vote twice? Someone's noting someone voted for Arlene Galindo.
A clarification. Arlene Galindo voted yes, and she left. And then we reviewed these the language again. And then Kim started the voting again. And I was asked by Arlene to reiterate her initial vote.
That's
Got it. We did, for that purpose, we kept the motion as is, so that if she began her vote when we began the process, that vote should still count. The motion did not change, and we will show everyone what the vote is in just a second. We're going to ask Ryan to pull his screen down, and then we'll confirm the vote tally in just a few moments for everyone to validate their vote. You'll see your name on screen before we show you the tally. Yes, Matt, we do have a spreadsheet with rows and columns. Don't worry.
Okay, and are we ready to display those votes?
We are ready. If you can show the names, and we'll have everyone validate your vote to make sure no one voted twice or that you did not. There we go. And to make sure that everyone is represented appropriately. So if you see your name or your alternate or your primary's name, please note that your vote is correct. If anyone sees an incorrect vote, now's your chance to flag what that is. Please raise your hand if you have any changes to your vote or adjustments needed. Seeing none, let's see what the tally is. We have 10 yes and 19 no, which means that port measures will not be included in the SERP based on the votes so far. And so that means that we move forward. Oh, sorry.
Excuse me, I don't see my name up there at all on the
I'm
spreadsheet.
seeing who this is. Debbie, okay?
You see it up there?
Line
Right
number
there.
12.
Ah, there we go. Okay. Now I can see it.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry,
If
I
your
would
name
say
was
it's scrolled
called,
down.
if your name was called, you are on the spreadsheet. And what we will do is make sure you all see a copy of this. But what this vote means is that there are no port measures included in your SERP. And so we will not move forward with the next vote, which was related to which language you would include, because we voted no on that. So that is the vote for this effort. We will move forward with the SERP as unanimously voted on last week, and you will have a fantastic SERP that includes measures on locomotives and a number of other items, but the SERP will not include port measures specifically. And so you will have additional opportunities to debate that with Jeff and his team in future meetings with the CSC. That being said, we do have another agenda item. We are well over time, but I want to apologize for that, only because I want to be respectful, but I also want to acknowledge that this was an important conversation that deserved the time that you all gave it today. I see Mary Elizabeth's hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify here. So since we have not included the port in the SERP, going forward, the assistance that we have obtained with the Valley Air District to help try to encourage the port and get involved with the development of that environmental group will no longer occur.
Correct. And there will be no technical advisory committee either.
Thank you.
Jessica.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, I just, first of all, I want to acknowledge there's been a lot discussed tonight, and I know that in taking that vote, there needed to be all this discussion. So I just want to acknowledge the time that it's taken and the time it's still taking. And thank you all for that work. And I just also want to recognize that in the past few meetings, we've asked a lot of folks to really take the chat seriously and talk specifically about the items that we're discussing, which certainly I think a lot of the chat focused on, especially in the lead up to the vote. There were a lot of clarifying questions, but we want, I think in an effort to keep the chat professional, to, not call out people, call people names, and especially, not disrespect the hard work of all the facilitators who, I think going back and forth between the different languages of the votes and trying to acknowledge your questions while moving the meeting forward, certainly I don't think deserve some of the language that was shared in the chat. So I just wanted to publicly acknowledge that hopefully I have a lot of support, and I think we have a lot of support from this committee on all of the hard work that they've been putting forward to move these things along. And just acknowledge that we saw the comments and that those comments really aren't something that we should, continue. I don't think as a CSC, especially in the chat, where it just kind of sidetracks the conversation and really takes the focus from the hard work, not just of the facilitators, but really of the committee. So I just want to make that clear. With that, please, Erica, take us to our next item.
Thank you, Jessica. We do strive for a dignity-infused approach, and we appreciate respect on all fronts. Moving forward, we do have another agenda item related to language that you did approve last week, and I think the Air District wants to show some of that to you quickly and make sure that that is in line with the discussions we had a few days ago.
So thanks, everyone. And thanks for all the input, and this will be similar to the language that Ned sent over, and totally agree with him on the need to, similar to other discussions, some generalities, but I think there's a lot of the specificity that the steering committee was looking to incorporate. And so the recommendation language would be to support implementation of the Stockton SERP, the district CARB, and other implementing agencies. We'll coordinate with the CSC to establish subcommittees as needed to provide more focused technical advisory support in the development of strategies approved under the SERP. In addition to the technical support provided by the district CARB and other supporting agencies, these subcommittees may provide opportunities for technical advisory support from third-party technical experts, including academia, engineers, technology providers, and others as necessary. And then the other component in regards to health studies, as a CSC priority is recommended that district, CARB, and OEHA, which is the Office of Environmental Health Hazards Assessment, support Stockton-specific health studies supported by community and air monitoring data, SERP implementation, and ongoing air quality strategy implementation to assist in ongoing AB 617 implementation as outlined and appropriate under the CARB blueprint.
This is the language that was adjusted based on the conversation from last week, so you all see it. This is going to be included in the SERP that's going to be our district board in a packet this week and then voted on next week. And I'm seeing in the chat that this looks good. We've got some validation in the chat. Any additional, maybe we'll take one comment given the time frame. Are we feeling generally comfortable with this language? Seems like we've got quite a few nods that I'm seeing. Lots of chat comments. Taylor, I see your hand.
Yeah, a couple questions. First, I want to make sure we're clear on who is appointing, who is designating or identifying the technical advisory group, and also what is the timing at which they coordinate with the CSC?
Yeah,
two questions.
Good questions, Taylor. And we want to hear from the steering committee on the implementation phases on the specific measures that they want technical, they feel like they need technical support. We're totally open for those conversations, want to continue to engage with the committee in understanding, what those needs are. So, in our effort, we did reach out to, for example, South Coast and Bay Area to try to understand, and the proposal follows kind of what they've been doing as well. When it came to specifics, the steering committee asked for example, in South Coast, the steering committee members asked South Coast for some information on the source apportionment and for some modeling questions, and they asked that the Air District reach out to some of the colleges and universities in the area to provide some feedback. And so that's how that kind of formed. The role that those technical advisory groups, from my understanding, is they review some of the information and provide feedback on if, in their estimation, if it's correct or incorrect, that type of thing. I think what we've tried to do in the SERP or strategy implementation is bring in the experts that are knowledge in these different things and provide feedback to the steering committees as we're developing plans and projects to do that work. So hopefully that captures everything, the desires of the steering committee to have that support.
Brief, just follow up on that. Sorry, just a brief follow up. Does that defeat the purpose of an independent technical advisory group? The district chooses who that is. Should that not be up to the steering committee?
We take the advice. I mean, if the steering committee has individuals that they want to get feedback from, Taylor, we're totally open to it. We're not saying that we have to be the sole sources that are going out there and looking for it. And we're welcome to input on what the steering committee is looking for.
Thanks, Taylor. I'm seeing some comments of support in the chat. Is there anybody that does not support this language? And if so, we will move forward with it as presented. Raise your hand if you do not support this language and you want to provide a comment related to that. Otherwise, we will assume that we have general support for this language and that it will move forward with the SERP that is going to be our district board. Matt, I see your hand.
Yeah, I mean, if it's going to be authorized by 617, the technical advisory group should be designed by a subcommittee of CSC members. And I don't see, committee input is not the same thing as CSC design. And so this does not reach my standard of compliance with the other technical advisory groups that I've been involved in and seen designed elsewhere.
Thanks for that feedback. Any other comments? Before we move forward, I'm seeing one and hearing one point of concern. Any others? Seeing and hearing none. I'm seeing quite a bit of support. And I think Matt's following up on his comments. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm only hearing one bit of concern related to the structure. I do think there's some flexibility within the language to move that forward in implementation, so I don't want to negate Matt's comment, but I do see that there are not additional concerns from the other committee members, which means we have well over that 50% to move this forward. And I do believe we have that necessary, that number ready to go. So we will move that forward without needing an entire vote, because there's only been one person that raised their hand to say they were concerned about some of the language. Most of the comments in here are support. I see Taylor's hand.
I agree we should hold a vote.
We can certainly do that. If you'd like to vote, we will take an extra 10 minutes. I want to be mindful of everyone's time, but we certainly can schedule another vote for this committee. I know the meeting's already run over. Yeah, I know I'm getting a lot of comments on all sides. Let's end this meeting and then let's vote. So we certainly can hold a vote to support this. We need a motion. Let's do that formally.
This is Ed. I'll move that we support the statement as written.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second.
And can we stop the share so I can see the second on that? Apologies, Ryan. Can I see who the second was?
Mary Elizabeth.
Mary Elizabeth, thank you. Ed and Mary Elizabeth, and then I will ask Hannah and Kim to begin that voting process one more time. And if you'll bear with us for another 15 seconds, we'll get up another document and we will read voice vote. I want to acknowledge that we've lost quite a few people because this meeting is running long, but I do want to flag for you all that this is important and will probably be until about 7:30 for today's meeting.
Okay. And just so we can put it in writing for everyone in the chat, this is to approve. I'm just gonna.
A yes vote would be to approve the language as written. A no vote would be to amend.
Okay. Okay. So again, Hannah, I'm going to be going alphabetically by first name.
Right.
So if you're still here, Anthony Macias. No. Arlene Galindo.
Arlene Galindo, yes.
Okay, and then to reiterate, that was Cynthia Lau, who's Arlene's alternate. Bianca Mendoza.
No.
Catherine Garupa White.
No.
Debbie Provost.
Yes.
And I think we lost Douglas. Edward.
Yes.
Okay. Is Florence still here?
Yes, I am. I vote yes.
Okay. Irene Kalimlim.
No.
Jennifer Flores.
That was a yes.
Okay. Jonathan Pruitt.
Yes.
Nate Knott.
Yes.
Okay. Kenda Templeton.
I'm going to have to abstain because I don't know what the language is. I was
I had to step away for a moment.
Okay. Kevin Amen.
Yes.
Okay. Leonard Seawood.
No.
That was no?
No.
Okay. Margot Prouse.
Yes.
Maria Cardenas. Mariah Looney.
No.
Mary Elizabeth.
Yes.
Matt Holmes.
No.
Ned Leba.
Yes.
Okay. Noemi.
I vote no.
Okay. Regina Griffin.
No.
Sylvia Cantu.
No.
And then just briefly, for those of you that, I think someone was asking about the language itself, it's now up on the screen. If you'd like to come back to, we can come back to you at the end.
Stacy Paniasi.
No.
Taylor Williams.
No.
Tina Lau. Nope, I saw you just unmuted, Tina. I'm not sure if you're having trouble. You can drop your answer in the chat as well.
Said yes.
Oh, great. Vanessa Palomares.
No.
And Victoria Moreno.
Yes.
Okay, and then Kenda, if you wanted to circle back to your vote after seeing the language, you're welcome to do that unless you're not comfortable.
I'm not comfortable unless you want to wait 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and then this was a close vote, so I'll have to verify with Hannah that she has the same answers.
Yes, Kim, I have 13 yes and 12 no.
Yeah, that's what I have.
So 15 yes and 12 no means the language moves forward.
Not 15, 13.
13.
1, 3.
Oh,
we're displaying it
1,
right
3.
now. 1, 3.
Thank you. Please check your vote to ensure that that adds up. Go slowly along the top just to validate, but it's literally 50% plus 1. So the yes means we move forward with the language as presented. The no means an amend. And we had the yeses at 13 and 12. Were there any miscalculated votes based on this scroll? If so, please unmute or raise your hand. Seeing and hearing none, that vote passes. That language will move forward into the SERP with the understanding that there is still the flexibility to certainly discuss how that process works during implementation. So I do think that those of you that were on the no side still have a lot of voice that you can provide in the implementation of this committee, or how that committee is structured and how that insight is provided. So that is the agenda for today. We are a little over time, and I want to be mindful of public comments, so I'm going to keep us moving. We have a number of public comments that have been dropped into the chat that were part of the earlier conversation. We don't need to reiterate those, but I will ask the Air District team if you have any additional public comments related to the latest part of our conversation.
No comment. Yeah.
No problem. Great, thank you. And I do also want to acknowledge that this is the last meeting before your SERP moves over to Air District vote. It's a critical part of your process and an important one, and it's incredibly important that you've all made such phenomenal progress over the last few months, and this is a big milestone for you. So certainly there was a lot of deliberation, a lot of voices were heard, and I think that is certainly the intent of this process, and we appreciate you all playing such an important role in that. Sylvia, your vote was counted, and it was flagged as a no vote. And it was included, and we will make sure that all of those rosters are shared with you all so that you can see and validate that in the record. I want to ask the Air District team if they have any closing comments before we wrap this meeting. Thank you, Anthony.
No, I understand that this was a difficult meeting and understand where we are as a committee. I don't want this to detract in any way from the next 5 years that we're going to be working on implementing this CERP and all the measures that are included in it, and that your voices will be heard in that process, and we'll continue to work with you in any way that we can. So thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. You know, these processes are messy. Committees like this can be very, very messy. The process is important. Your voices are important. Treating people with dignity and respect is important. You are all fantastic community servants, and we really appreciate your efforts. We appreciate your time, and know that, you know, even those voices that don't always cannot connect are still heard. And that is the intent of this process. And I want to thank everyone that spoke up tonight, and even those of you that didn't, that participated. This is important. Your CERP is fantastic, and it's going to move forward and make huge impacts on the community of Stockton. And so as you continue this process, know that there is lots of work to be done and lots of impact to be made, and you have just begun what is a really important 5-year implementation effort. So thank you all for your time tonight. And
Erica, just to mention, Heather has been dropping in the comments from YouTube and Facebook into the chat as we've gotten them. I don't know if there's any last minute comments, but we have been dropping them into the chat. And if they've been appropriate to the conversation, we have brought them up in past meetings. Tonight, some of them really weren't about the conversation. Heather, were there any more public comments?
No, there were not.
Yeah. Yeah, and earlier in the conversation, there were some chat comments from the from YouTube that were unrelated to the dialogue, but they are reflected and they will be included in the minutes, and they are always followed up on. So no worries there. We are committed to that engagement process, even though most of our public are watching on social media. So please do know that we don't disregard that feedback. Before any parting comments before we adjourn this meeting. Jamie's dog is saying goodbye, and I see everyone's hand. Thank you all for the time, the extra time certainly, and we appreciate all of you and your efforts. We will see you next month.
Mariah,